You know the pictures, you have definitely seen them on your feed. It's always a solitary figure in a bright yellow raincoat standing in front of this, thundering waterfall.
With a neon green aurora dancing over a glacier.
Yes, or that steaming blue water that looks like it belongs on another planet, not Earth.
Iceland. It
Ugh.
is, I mean, it's the undisputed heavyweight champion of the bucket list era.
Exactly. It's the Instagram perfection capital of the world. But today we're going to do something a little different. We are going to put down the filters and pick up the receipts. Because when you actually dig into the reports, the travel blogs, the forum debates, and all the safety warnings, a really different picture starts to emerge, and we need to answer a big question. Is the land of fire and ice actually the land of overpriced burgers and sneaker waves?
It's a totally valid question. And looking at the stack of sources we have for this deep dive, the answer is, well, it's complex. It's not a simple yes or no. We aren't just looking at glossy travel guides today. We've got budget breakdowns from real bloggers like Adventurous Kate. We have industry reports on new tourism taxes that are, frankly, shaking up the economy, academic papers on over-tourism, and some genuinely terrifying safety warnings from surfer magazines.
And of course, we cannot forget the Reddit threads about eating fermented shark. I went down a serious rabbit hole there.
We will definitely get to the shark. But the mission here isn't to discourage you or anyone else from going. It's to equip you. We want to move beyond the pretty pictures and look at the logistical, the financial, and the cultural realities of visiting Iceland right now. Is it overrated? Is it dangerous? Or is it just misunderstood?
I think we have to start with the biggest barrier to entry. We have to start with the wallet. Because the number one thing I see across all these sources is the term sticker shock. We all know Scandinavia is expensive generally, but help us calibrate this. Are we talking fancy dinner expensive, or are we talking I need to refinance my mortgage expensive?
It is significantly expensive. I mean, to put in perspective, sources consistently rank Iceland, alongside Switzerland and Norway, as the top 3 most expensive countries to visit in the world.
The top 3. Wow.
And before we get to the specific numbers, it's crucial to understand the why. You have to remember, this is an isolated island just below the Arctic Circle.
Right. So there are shipping costs on basically everything. You can't just truck things in.
Exactly. Almost everything is imported.
Yeah.
But that's only half the equation. You also have a local economy with very high standards of living. Labor unions are strong, wages are high. So when you buy a service, whether that's a guided tour or a simple meal, you are paying for that high standard of living. There is no cheap labor to subsidize the tourist experience.
Okay, that makes sense on a macro level. But let's put some real numbers on this for you if you're planning a trip. We pulled a budget breakdown from the travel blogger Adventurous Kate. She documented a 13-day road trip, and the number that jumped out at me wasn't the hotels. It was the gas.
The petrol. It's a shock for Americans especially.
Just to drive the ring road, the main highway that circles the island, she spent around $400 just on fuel. And that was a few years ago. So with inflation, it's likely higher now.
And that number fluctuates with global oil prices, but it is consistently high. And that brings up the first major friction point for travelers. You feel like you need a car to see the sights because public transit doesn't go to the waterfalls, but the car itself becomes a massive line item.
And then you have to park the car and sleep somewhere. Her report notes that basic hotel rooms averaged about $182 a night. But here is the kicker. She explicitly mentions these are often places with shared bathrooms.
That is a critical detail for setting expectations. In many other destinations, say Southeast Asia or even parts of Southern Europe, $180 or $200 a night gets you luxury. It gets you a spa.
Right.
In Iceland, particularly in high-demand areas like Lake Mævatten or near the famous glaciers, that might get you a standard twin room with a view of a parking lot and a bathroom down the hall.
So you're paying luxury prices for utility lodging. Now let's talk about food. Because this is where I feel like the vacation vibe really dies for a lot of people. You sit down for a simple entree.
You are looking at $25 to $30. And we aren't talking about a steak or fresh lobster. We are talking about a burger or a pizza.
Which leads to a really funny pattern I noticed in the research. I'm calling it the hot dawn economy. If you read through the travel advice forums, you see this trajectory where travelers start with these grand plans for dining out, they get the first bill, and then they immediately pivot to hot dogs.
It's a survival strategy.
Yeah.
But to be fair to Iceland, the hot dog, the pilsa, is practically a national dish. It's not the scrap meat hot dog you might be used to in the U.S. It's largely lamb-based, usually served with raw and crispy onions and a sweet brown mustard called pilsusenep.
And the price point on that?
Usually around $6 US. It is often the only hot meal you can find for under $10. It becomes a lifeline for travelers at gas stations. The other survival tip that comes up constantly in the sources is the grocery store with the pig logo.
Onus. It looks like a piggy bank.
That's the one. It's a no-frills discount supermarket. If you aren't buying your breakfast and lunch supplies there to offset the cost of dinner, you are going to burn through your budget very, very quickly. The sources are unanimous on this. Pack a cooler bag, go to Bonus, make your own sandwiches.
There is one other money-saving tip that seemed almost too good to be true, but every source agrees on it. Water.
Oh, yes. Do not buy bottled water in Iceland. It is the ultimate rookie mistake.
Because the tap water is safe.
It's not just safe, it's exceptional. It is glacial runoff that has been filtered through lava fields for decades. It is literally the same water they bottle and sell to tourists for $4. Buying water in Iceland is essentially a voluntary tax on not knowing any better.
Speaking of taxes, I want to pivot to a really interesting economic development that came up in the industry reports. We've talked about the cost to the traveler, but there's a new cost emerging for the industry. Iceland has introduced a new tax specifically targeting cruise passengers.
This is a fascinating bit of policy because it highlights a real conflict. It's roughly $18, or 2,500 Icelandic krona, per port visit. Now, to a passenger on a $3,000 cruise, an extra $18 fee might not sound like a deal breaker. It's the price of a couple of coffees.
Right, it seems negligible to the individual.
But for the cruise lines, who operate on tight margins and multiply that by thousands of passengers across multiple stops, it's a massive new line item.
And the government's argument is that they need this money to build infrastructure to handle all these people, right? To protect the nature.
Correct. It's meant to fund sustainability initiatives. But here's the conflict, and it's a sharp one. Our sources mention that rural ports, small towns like Akureyri and Ísafjörður, are seeing booking drops of over 50% for future years because cruise lines are pulling out.
50%. That is a huge blow to a small town economy.
It is devastating. These are towns that rely heavily on that seasonal influx of cash to survive the dark winter. So you have this tension between national sustainability goals, trying to limit the environmental footprint, and the economic survival of these small coastal communities. It's a classic case of policy having unintended, very sharp consequences.
It really sounds like Iceland is wrestling with its own popularity. Which brings us to the next big theme in our stack, over-tourism. We mentioned the bucket list earlier. Is Iceland becoming Disneyland?
That is the term that pops up in the academic abstracts, the Disneyland effect.
Yeah.
But we need to be nuanced here. It's not the whole country. If you go to the West Fjords or the East, it's empty.
Right.
But you have this massive influx of tourists funneling into a very small area. Reykjavik, the Golden Circle, and the South Coast.
And that concentration creates strain.
Severe strain. We have reports of roads deteriorating because they weren't built for heavy tour buses. And then there are, let's call them biological issues.
Oh, I saw this in the notes. The toilet situation.
It sounds trivial, but it's a major indicator of infrastructure failure. At major sites like Gullfoss, there are pay toilets. It's a small fee, maybe $1.50. But sources report tourists refusing to pay out of principle or lack of coins and effectively defecating outdoors near the sites.
That is definitely not the memory you want to take home. And it can't be good for the local sentiment toward tourists.
It creates a lot of resentment. One source from Responsible Travel notes that central Reykjavik is starting to feel like a tourist ghetto. There are so many Airbnbs that few locals actually live in the center anymore. It pushes out local culture and replaces it with puffin shops and tourist chains.
So you fly there to experience Icelandic culture, but you end up staying in a neighborhood that is just other tourists from Ohio and Germany.
Precisely. You are in a bubble. And seasonality just compounds this. Everyone wants to go in July and August. That's when it's crowded, that's when it's expensive, and that's when the Disney effect is at its peak.
But the sources suggest a workaround, right? The shoulder season.
May or September. That's the sweet spot. You get decent weather, lower prices, and fewer crowds. But you have to be careful. If you push it too far into winter to save money or to chase the northern lights, you hit the winter reality.
22 hours of darkness.
It can be a genuine shock to the system. You might have grand plans to explore, but if the sun comes up at 11 a.m. and sets at 3:30 p.m., your window for actually seeing those waterfalls is incredibly small.
It really changes the math on the value of the trip. You're paying for the hotel for 24 hours, but you can only see the country for 4 of them.
And you're doing it in potentially dangerous conditions. Which brings us to the most serious part of the research.
Yes. I want to spend some time here because it's genuinely scared me reading the sources. We need to talk about sneaker waves.
Reynisfjara Beach, the black sand beach. It is arguably one of the most visually stunning places on Earth. Black sand, basalt columns, mist. But statistically, it is deadly.
The numbers are stark. 6 people have died there between 2013 and 2024.
And many more have been swept off their feet and dragged out, barely surviving. The phenomenon is called a sneaker wave. Unlike normal surf, where you can see the sets coming in a rhythm, these are powerful surges that run much further up the beach than you expect. They are caused by long-period swells created by storms deep in the Atlantic. They pile up and then, boom, they surge way past the driest sand line.
Hence the name sneaker. They come out of nowhere, but what's baffling to me is the behavior described in the sources. There are flashing red lights, there are sirens, there are warning signs in multiple languages, and yet people turn their backs on the ocean to take selfies.
There is a disconnect. We view the world through screens. We think of nature as a backdrop or a theme park. But nature in Iceland is raw, physical, and completely indifferent to your Instagram feed. One source described a man being obliterated by a wave while posing. He didn't even see it coming.
It's not just the waves, though. The wind sounds intense.
It's not just breezy. We're talking about gusts that can and do slam car doors shut on people's fingers. Or, more commonly, if you park facing the wrong way and open the door, the wind catches it and bends the hinges backward.
Wait, it snaps the door backward?
Yes. It's a standard clause in rental agreements now. Wind damage to doors is common.
And speaking of rental agreements, we need to define something for you. F-roads. I saw this term all over the car rental sites.
This is a classic trap for the adventurous driver. F-roads are the highland roads. The F stands for F-jawl, which means mountain. They are unpaved, rough tracks that lead into the interior. You might look at Google Maps and think, oh, that's a shortcut.
Right.
But standard rental cars are generally not insured for F-roads.
So if you take your regular SUV onto one of these,
it is illegal without a proper 4x4. And if you destroy the undercarriage on a rock or drown the engine trying to cross a river, which happens frequently because these roads involve river crossings, you're liable for the entire value of the car. Insurance covers nothing.
So you could go home with a souvenir bill for $40,000.
Easily. And that really ruins the vacation.
Okay, we've covered the danger to your wallet and the danger to your life. Let's talk about the danger to your taste buds. We have to talk about the food. Specifically, the fomented shark.
Hakral, the infamous national dish.
I dove into the Reddit threads on this, and it is a roller coaster. People describing the smell as ammonia or straight up cat pee. Why on earth would anyone invent this?
Survival. Historically, Icelanders couldn't afford to waste food. But the Greenland shark, which is what this is, has high levels of urea and trimethylene oxide. It acts as a natural antifreeze in the deep, cold water. But for humans, it's poisonous when fresh.
So they had to figure out a way to make the poison edible.
Exactly. The traditional process is rustic. They bury the shark in sand and gravel for weeks to let it putrefy, basically rot, which presses the fluids out. Then they hang it to dry for months.
Delicious. So does it taste as bad as it smells?
Surprisingly, the consensus among the brave souls on Reddit seems to be no. The smell is the hurdle. Once you get past the ammonia, sources describe the taste as a mix of smoked cod and brie or nutty blue cheese.
Nutty blue cheese. I can handle. Cat pee is a harder sell. But is this something locals actually eat? Or is this just a hazing ritual for tourists?
It's largely ceremonial now. It's eaten during this Horriblat midwinter festival. But you see locals in the forums admitting it's mostly a novelty or a symbol of heritage rather than a Tuesday night snack. You won't find people snacking on it while watching Netflix.
And I read you're supposed to wash it down with Brennivin.
Black Death.
Yeah.
Caraway Schnapp. It's the traditional palate cleanser.
I feel like you need a palate cleanser after just talking about it. But there are other things on the menu that might shock people. Sour ram's testicles.
Hrutsbunger. Pickled in whey and set in a block of gelatin. And boiled sheep's head, svi, where the face is still attached to the skull on your plate.
Okay, and then there's puffin, which feels controversial. They're the mascot of Icelandic tourism.
It is controversial. Puffin, or lindi, has been a food source for centuries. It's described as dark, purple meat that tastes fishy because of their diet. But puffin populations are dwindling rapidly due to climate change and overfishing. Many sources now strongly urge tourists not to order it. It's another area where tradition clashes with modern sustainability.
So if you're a foodie, Iceland is, let's call it, adventurous. I want to pivot to logistics one last time. Say you're planning this trip, but you have mobility issues. How accessible is the land of fire and ice?
It's a real mixed bag. Reykjavik itself is actually quite good. Curb cuts, accessible buses, venues like the Harpa Concert Hall are fully accessible. Even the Blue Lagoon has ramps and private changing rooms for people with disabilities.
But once you leave the city...
That's the challenge. The natural sites are rugged. Places like the Jökulsárlón Glacier Lagoon are gravel and sand, very difficult to navigate in a wheelchair. The Golden Circle has some paved paths, viewing platforms at Geyser and Gullfoss, but the steepness can be a major barrier.
And we have to mention the bathroom fee again in this context.
Yes, the P fee. It is ubiquitous. If you have mobility issues, scrambling behind a rock isn't an option. You rely on these facilities. You need to have coins or be prepared to buy a coffee to use a restroom. It's a small logistical hurdle, but it catches people off guard.
One last group to address. The van lifers. The people who want to rent a camper van, drive around, and just sleep under the stars wherever they park.
That era is effectively over. The source is very clear. No wild camping. It is illegal to camp outside designated campsites now.
So no pulling over on the side of the ring road to sleep.
Absolutely not. And the locals are very vigilant about this. It's about protecting the moss. Icelandic moss is incredibly fragile. If you drive on it or camp on it, it takes decades to recover. So you must stay in a designated campsite, which again adds to the cost.
So what does this all mean? We've looked at the high costs, the crowds, the dangers of the ocean, and the shark meat. It feels like the narrative of Iceland as this pristine, easy getaway is a bit of a myth.
I wouldn't call it a myth, but it is a curated reality. Iceland offers spectacular beauty glaciers, volcanoes, unique history. That is all real. But the mission of this deep dive was to add the context. It demands a high budget, it demands respect for safety warnings, and it demands an understanding that you will likely be surrounded by other tourists unless you make a very conscious effort to step off the beaten path.
It's not just a postcard, it's a real place with real economic and environmental struggles.
Exactly. And that leads me to a provocative thought that kept coming up in the research. There is a tension here between consuming a destination and experiencing it.
What do you mean by consuming?
Well, the typical Iceland trip is a race. You race around the ring road in 7 days, you check the boxes, waterfall, glacier, black sand, you take the photo and you move on. You are consuming the sights like products. But with the rise of micro-retirements and longer travel, does the future of visiting places like Iceland rely on slowing down?
Staying in one place longer.
Exactly. Instead of spending $400 on gas to see the whole island in a blur, maybe you spend that time in just the north. You support the local economy more deeply, you reduce your carbon footprint, you avoid the Disneyland crowds in the south, and you maybe actually get to know the place beyond the surface.
That is a really interesting way to think about it. Maybe the best way to see Iceland is to see less of it, but see it better.
I think that's the key.
Well, if you're packing your bags, don't forget your windbreaker.
And maybe a clothespin for your nose if you try the shark.
And definitely a taste for hot dogs. Thanks for diving in with us.
Safe travels.